Once you have logged into the SIMS application, you can view the exception count. Exception is a message sent to a SIMS user who is required to take an immediate action on the task. Exceptions are only sent to the person who is responsible for closing the exception. Exceptions are initially raised in SIMS. They are either raised by the SIMS system or a SIMS user to whom the exception was initially sent. Click on the exception icon located on the header of the page. You can see a list of exceptions raised. Click on Go to Messaging Center. This will open the Messaging Center page. Click on the Exceptions tab. This tab has three sub-tabs: Raised, Reassigned, and Closed. Count for each of the sub-tabs will be displayed. Click on the Raised tab. This tab displays all exceptions raised by SIMS and those raised to you by other users of SIMS. In this case, there are 12 exceptions raised for you. Let us view the first exception. This exception is a corrective maintenance that has been allocated to the NOC officer logged in. He is required to assign a field technician for this corrective maintenance immediately. Details of the exception raised, such as who raised the exception, time and date raised, who else has been notified, will be displayed. Click on the Add icon to review the trail of the exception. It shows that Adam Potter, the NOC lead, has raised the exception to the NOC officer logged in. The NOC officer logged in can either close this exception after assigning a field technician, or assign this exception to another user by clicking on Assign Exception. For instance, let us assume that the NOC officer has assigned a field technician for the corrective maintenance and is therefore closing the exception. Click on Close Exception. Add comments to close this exception. You can also attach files by clicking on Choose File. Then click Close Exception. The exception will now be closed. Click on OK. You can view the exception under Close sub-tab. To do this, click on Exceptions tab. Click on Close sub-tab. You can now see that the status of the exception is closed. Let us view another exception and reassign it to another user. Click on Raise sub-tab. The exception here is a routine maintenance which has been allocated to the NOC officer logged in, and he is required to assign the maintenance to a field technician. For some reason, the NOC officer is not able to assign the field technician. So he reassigns the exception to another NOC officer. Click on Assign Exception. Select a user to whom you wish to assign this exception. Let us assign this exception to NOC Officer 2. Click on NOC Radio button. Select NOC Officer 2 from the drop-down list. Add comments to assign this exception. Click on Assign. This exception has been successfully assigned to Knock Officer 2. Click on OK. Now click on the Exceptions tab. Click on the Reassign sub-tab. The Knock Officer logged in can now view this reassigned exception under the Reassign tab, and Knock Officer 2 can see this exception under Raised tab. Click on Add icon to view the trail of this exception. The status of this exception is now open. The trail shows that the exception was raised by Adam Potter to Knock Officer 1, and then Knock Officer 1 reassigned this exception to Knock Officer 2. Knock Officer 2 can either close the exception or can reassign it to some other user.